Printing images to a commercial printing press. Printing images to a commercial printing press. How to printing images to a commercial printing press. And how to preparing images for press. Preparing images for press. By the way, Photoshop, you can prepare image files for offset lithography and digital printing, gravure, and other commercial printing process. And generally, your workflow depends on the capabilities of the prepress facility. Before you begin a workflow for commercial printing, contact the prepress staff to learn their requirements. For example, they may not want you to convert to CMYK at any point because they may need to use prepress specific setting, and here are some possible scenarios for preparing your image files to achieve predictable printing results. And work entirely in RGB mode and make sure that the image file is tagged with the RGB working space profile. And if your printer, by the way, or repress stuff use a color management system, you should be able to use your file profile to make an accurate conversion to CMYK before producing the film and printing press. And work in RGB mode until you finish editing your image, and then convert the image to CMYK mode and make any additional color and tonal adjustments, especially check the highlights and shadows of the image, and use levels and curves or hue saturation adjustment layers to make corrections. These adjustments, by the way, should be very minor and flatten the file if necessary, and then send the CMYK file to the professional printer. And after that, place your RGB or CMYK image in Adobe InDesign or Adobe Illustrator. In general, by the way, most images printed on a commercial press are not printed directly from Photoshop but from a page layout program like Adobe InDesign or illustration program like Adobe Illustrator. For more information on importing Photoshop file into Adobe InDesign or Adobe Illustrator, you should to see Adobe InDesign Help or the Adobe Illustrator Help. And after that, here are a few issues to keep in mind that when you work on an image intended for commercial printing. And if you know the characteristics of the press, you can specify, by the way, the highlight and the shadow output to preserve certain details. And if you use a desktop printer to preview the appearance of the final printed piece, keep in mind that a desktop printer cannot faithfully replicate the output of a commercial printing press, by the way. And the professional color proof gives a more accurate preview of the final printed piece. And if you have a profile from a commercial press, you can choose that, by the way, with the proof setup command, and then view a soft proof using the proof colors command. And you can use this method, by the way, to preview the final printed piece on your monitor. And be careful, please, here now. Some printers, by the way, may prefer to receive your document in PDF format, especially if the documents need to conform to PDF/X standards. So what about set output options? Set output options is meaning that if you are preparing your images for commercial printing directly from Photoshop, you can also select and preview a variety of page marks and other output options using the print command. And generally, these output options, by the way, should be specified only by prepress professionals or people knowledgeable about the commercial printing process. Like the next image and next screenshot. The screenshot now explain for you page marks, A is meaning gradient tint bar, and B label, and C registration marks, and D progressive color bar, and E corner crop mark, and F center crop mark, and G description, and H is meaning star target. And we have steps. Step number 1, you have to choose file firstly, then print. Number 2, choose output from the pop-up menu. Step number 3, set one or more of the following options. So what about, we have many options here now. What about celebration bars? Celebration bars is meaning that prints an 11-step grayscale, a transition in density from 0 to 100% in 10% increments, and with a CMYK color separation. A gradient tint bar is printed, by the way, to the left of each CMYK plate, and a progressive color bar to the right. Note here please now, celebration bars, registration marks and crop marks, and labels are printed, by the way, only if the paper is larger than the printed image. And what about registration marks? It's meaning that print registration marks on the image, including balls, eyes, and star targets. These marks, by the way, are used primarily for aligning color separations on both script printers. And what about corner crop marks? Corner crop marks is meaning that print crop marks where the page is to be trimmed, and you can print crop marks at the corners and on both script printers, and selecting this option will also print star targets, by the way. So what about center crop marks? Center crop marks is meaning that print crop marks where the page is to be trimmed, and you can print crop marks at the center of each page, of each edge. I'm so sorry. And what about description? Description is meaning that print any description text entered in the file information dialog box up to about 300 characters, and description text is always printed, by the way, in 9 point Helvetica plain type. And what about label? Labels is meaning that prints the file name above the image, and if printing separations, the separation name is printed, by the way, as part of the label. And what about emulsion down? Emulsion down is meaning that makes type readable when the emulsion is down, and that is when the photosensitive layer on a piece of film of photographic paper is facing away from you. And normally images printed on paper are printed with emulsion up and with type readable when the photosensitive layer faces you. And images printed on film are often printed with emulsion down. So what about negative? Negative is meaning that prints an inverted version of the entire output, including all masks and any background color, by the way, unlike the invert command in the image menu. And the negative options converts the output, by the way, not the on-screen image, to a negative. And if you print separations directly to film, you probably want a negative, and also in many countries film positive are common. And check with your print shop to determine which is required. To determine the emulsion site, examine the film under a bright light after it has been developed. And the dull site is the emulsion, the shiny site is the base. And check whether your print shop requires film with positive emulsion up, and negative emulsion up, and positive emulsion down, or negative emulsion down. So what about background? Background is meaning that select the background color to be printed on the page outside the image area. For example, a black or colored background may be desirable for slides printed to a film recorder. And to use this option, by the way, you should click background firstly, and then select a color from the color picker. This is printing option only. It does not affect the image itself, by the way. So what about border? Border is meaning that print a black border around an image, and type a number and choose a unit value to specify the width of the border. And what's the meaning of bleed? Bleed is meaning that print's crop marks is height rather than outside the image, and you can use this option, by the way, to trim the image within the graphic, type a number and choose a unit value to specify the width of the bleed. And what about interpolation? Interpolation is meaning that reduces the jagged appearance of a low resolution image by automatically resampling up while printing on both script printers. And resampling may reduce, by the way, the sharpness of the image quality. And what about print separations from Photoshop? Print separations from Photoshop. By the way, when preparing your image for prepress and working with CMYK images or images with spot colors, by the way, you can print each color channel as a separate page. Note here in this point, separations from CMYK.tone or multi-channel documents printed on non-PostScript printers may not be identical to those printed on both script printers, by the way. Like the next screenshot now. Each color channel printed as a separate page, by the way. And note here, if you are printing an image from another application and want to print spot channels to spot color plates, you must first, by the way, save the file in DCS 2.0 format. And the DCS 2.0 pre-service spot channels, by the way. This format, by the way, is supported by applications such as Adobe InDesign and Quark Express. We have two steps. Step number 1. Make sure that your document is in CMYK color mode and multi-channel or .2 mode, and then choose file, then choose print. And step number 2. Choose separations from the color handling drop down menu. And depending on the designated printer and printer drivers on your computer, these options, by the way, may also appear in the print setting dialog box in Windows, and then click the properties button to access the printer driver options in macOS. You can't use the pop-up menu in the print setting dialog box that appears. Step number 3. You should click print to execute, and the separations are printed, by the way, for each of the colors in the image. How to prepare an image with spot channels for printing from another applications. We have 4 steps. Step number 1. If the image is a bit tone, convert it to multi-channel color mode firstly. Step number 2. You should to save the image in DCS 2.0 format. And step number 3, after that, in the DCS 2.0 format dialog box, you should to deselect the include halftone screen and the include transfer function options. Step number 4. Open or import the image in Photoshop and set your screen angles, and make sure that you have communicated to the printer the spot color you want for each of the color plates. Note here, please, and be careful. By the way, you can place a BSD file containing spot colors directly in Illustrator or InDesign without special preparation. How to create a color trap. Create a color trap. By the way, a trap is an overlap that prevents tiny gaps in the printed image caused by a slight misregistration on press. And contact your service provider before you do any trapping. And in most cases, by the way, your print shop determines whether trapping is needed. And if so, the print shop staff will tell you what values to enter in the trap dialog box. Like the next image now. The next screenshot explains for you trapping to correct misalignment, and AS meaning misregistration with no trap, and BS meaning misregistration with trap. And the trapping is intended, by the way, to correct the misalignment of solid colors. In general, you don't need, by the way, traps for continuous tone images such as photographs, and excessive trapping may produce an outline effect. These problems, by the way, may not be visible on screen and might show up only in print. And Photoshop uses standard rules for trapping, and we have steps. And we have options. All colors, by the way, spread under black, and lighter colors spread under darker colors, and yellow spreads under cyan and magenta and black, and pure cyan and pure magenta spread under each other equally. And you have steps here now. Step number 1. You should choose edit firstly, then choose convert to profile to view the image in the color space of the output device. You should to see work with color profiles. Step number 2. Choose image, then choose trap. And step number 3. For whites, enter the trapping value provided by your print shop. Then select a unit of measurement and then click OK. Consult your print shop to determine how much misregistration to expect. So what about determine scan resolution for printing? How to determine scan resolution for printing? By the way, you can use a number of techniques to determine the resolution at which to scan a photograph. And if you are scanning, by the way, photos to be printed, and you know the exact size and the printing screen frequency, you can use, by the way, the following techniques to determine the scanning resolution. And often it's easiest to scan at your scanner's maximum optical resolution and then resize the image in Photoshop later. And how to estimate scan resolution? By the way, you can determine the resolution for your scan using the original and the final image dimensions and the resolution of your output device. And then scan resolution translates into image resolution when you open the scanned image in Photoshop. We have steps. Step number 1. For laser printers and image setters, multiply the printer's screen frequency by 2. And to determine your printer's screen frequency, check your printer documentation or consult your device provider, by the way. And for inkjet printers, check your printer documentation for the optimal resolution. And many dye sublimation printers and devices that print directly onto photographic paper have an optimal resolution of 300 to 400 dpi. Step number 2. Determine the ratio of the final image dimensions to the original image dimensions. For example, the ratio of a 6 by 9 inch final image to a 2 by 3 inch original image is 3 to 1. And step number 3. Multiply the result of step 1 by the result of step 2. For example, suppose you are printing to an image setter with a screen frequency of 85 lpi. And the ratio of the final image to the original is 3 to 1. And first multiply 85, the screen frequency, by 2 to get 170. And then multiply 170 by 3 to get a scan resolution of 510 ppi. And if you are printing to an inkjet printer with an optimal resolution of 300 dpi, by the way, multiply 300 by 3 to get a scan resolution of 900. Note here please, and be careful. By the way, different color separation procedures might require different ratios of image resolution to screen frequency. It's a good idea, by the way, to check with your service provider or print shop before you scan the image. How to calculate the file size before scanning an image? How to calculate the file size before scanning an image? By the way, you can create Adobe file to predict the file size needed for the final output of your scan. We have steps. Step number 1. In Photoshop, choose file, then choose new. After that, step number 2, enter the width and the height and resolution of your final printed image. And the resolution should be 1.5 to 2 times the screen frequency you will use, by the way, to print. And make sure that the mode you plan to scan in is selected. And the new dialog box displays the file size, by the way. For example, suppose you want the final image to be 4 inches wide and 5 inches high, and you plan to print it with a 150 line screen using a 2 to 1 ratio, and so you set the resolution to 300, and the resulting file size is 5.15 megabyte, by the way. To produce the scan, enter the resulting file size in your scanner setting, and don't worry about resolution or image dimensions. And after you have scanned the image and imported it into Photoshop, use the image size command, by the way, and with the resemble image option deselected, and to enter the correct width and height for the image.